Hey guys, in this topic we're going to create a game of tic-tac-toe. We'll be working with random numbers. You may or may not need to include this header file. Include C time. We'll add some function declarations, then some definitions. Void, draw board. There will be one parameter. A pointer to an array named spaces. Spaces will be a one-dimensional array that will keep track of all the markers, like what spots are taken, what spots are occupied. Player move. The parameters will be a pointer to spaces and char player. Computer move. A pointer to spaces, char computer. Check winner, a pointer to spaces, char player, and char computer. Then lastly, check tie. And all we need is a pointer to our array spaces. Check winner and check tie will both return a Boolean value. Okay, let's add some function declarations. So after the main function, let's paste these. We do need to return some value for check winner and check tie because there is a return type. Just for now, as a placeholder, I'm going to return 0. But we'll change that later. Let's head to the main function and declare everything that we'll need. A character array named spaces. The size will be 9 spaces. We'll have 9 elements. Each contains an empty space. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8, 9. Good. Char player. Pick a character that you'd like to be. You could do X or something else. Char computer. Pick a character for the computer. Let's begin with O. Boolean running. I'll set this equal to true. When we begin our game, we will immediately invoke the draw board function. Then pass in our array. So remember, when we pass an array to a function, it decays into a pointer. So we don't need to create a pointer for this array. Within the draw board function, we will display a grid. So let's write something like this. Standard output, I'll add 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then a vertical bar. 5 spaces again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Vertical bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then a new line. Okay, let's copy this line. Right in the middle, I'm going to add one of the elements of our array, spaces. So right about there. Spaces at index 0. I'm going to copy this section of code. Right in the middle between the two vertical bars, I'll paste what we copied. Spaces at index 1. Then again, right in the middle, paste what you have. Spaces at index 2. This time we'll create a horizontal bar. Let's copy this. We'll replace the spaces with underscores. So right about there. Okay, let's see what we have. Okay, yeah, something like this. We'll have a player or the computer right in the center. So let's copy this line on top, paste it underneath, copy this line that displays elements of our array, paste it underneath, but change the element numbers 3, 4, 5. Then we'll copy this line, paste it underneath. Let's double check to see what we have. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Let's copy this line, paste it. Copy one of these lines where we display the elements of the array. paste it underneath. So we are missing elements 6, 7, 8. Let's copy one of these empty lines, paste it underneath. Then before and after we display this grid, I'll just display a new line. Standard output, new line. And let's do that after. Okay, let's see what we have. Yeah, not too bad. There's our grid of 9 spaces. Okay, that is the drawBoard function. We can close out of this. We're done with it. When we invoke the drawBoard function, we will pass in our array, which decays to a pointer, and then prints our board. Let's add a while loop after the drawBoard function. While our condition is running. Running is set to true initially. When we exit out of the game, we'll set running to be false. The first thing that we'll do is invoke the player move function. Player move, but we need to pass in our array, spaces, as well as a player. Player. Then let's fill in the player move function. Okay, player move. I'll create a local variable named number. The user will enter in a number between 1 and 9, depending on what space they'd like to occupy with their marker. I'll create a do while loop. Do while. The condition will be not number is greater than 0, or not number is less than 8. The user can only enter in a number between 0 and 8. Those numbers correspond to the elements of our array, elements with indices 0 through 8. Within the do while loop, we'll ask for some user input, standard output, enter a spot to place a marker, 1 through 9. Whatever the user types in, we'll just subtract 1, because the user doesn't know that arrays start with 0, supposedly. Standard input, number. So the user will enter in a number between 1 and 9. Then we will decrement the number by 1, because the array starts with 0. If spaces at index of number, whatever the user types in, is equal to an empty space. If that space isn't occupied, we'll add that marker to that spot. Spaces at index of number equals the player's marker. Then we'd like to break out of this while loop. So after the player moves, let's draw the board again to reflect any changes. Okay, enter a spot to place a marker. How about 1? Yeah, and there's our marker. Let's try it again. How about 9? Yep, and we are in the last spot, the bottom right corner. Let's enter in a number that's outside of this range, like 100. Enter a spot to place a marker. -1. Okay, so we're limited to the numbers 1 through 9. Even if I were to type 0, we still can't. So let's try something in the middle. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, and there's our marker. I'm just going to add a colon, then a space. Okay, and that is the player move function. We can close out of this function. Let's work on the computer move function next. Within the while loop, let's invoke that function, pass in our spaces array, as well as whatever character the computer is. Then we will draw the board again right after, just to update it. Within the computer move function, we'll create a local variable named number. We'll need a seed to generate a random number, srand. Within the parentheses, invoke the time function, pass in 0 or null, and we should be able to generate some random numbers. So I'm going to create a while loop. While the condition will be true, I would like to generate a random number between 0 through 8. We'll take number, set this equal to rand function, modulus 9. Number will be random between 0 and 8 technically. If we pick a spot number that is occupied already, we'll need to re-roll a random number. If spaces at index of number is equal to an empty space. We'll take spaces at index of number, set this equal to the computer's marker, then break out of this while loop. Let's test this function. After we pick a spot, the computer will pick a spot too. Yep, so the computer picked a spot right in the middle. Let's try it one more time. I'll pick the spot in the middle again, so that would be 5. And our computer picked spot number 2. Cool. Let's close out of the computer move function. After the player moves, then we draw the board again. We will check a winner. I'll use an if statement. Within the condition of the if statement, we will invoke the check winner function. The check winner function returns a Boolean value, so that's why we're placing it within the if statement. But we need to pass in a couple arguments, our spaces, the player, and the computer. If there's a winner, if this evaluates to be true, we will set running equal to false, and we will break. Let's add this if statement to after the computer moves too. Okay, let's fill in the check winner function. So right down here. We'll need to check all of the different win conditions. There's several. Normally I would use a switch, but it's going to get very complicated, especially for beginners. I think just to make this easier, we'll use a bunch of if and else if statements. Within the first condition of the if statement, we'll check to see if the first row all has matching characters. So we can do that by saying spaces at index of 0 is equal to spaces at index of 1 and spaces at index of 1 is equal to spaces at index of 2. If all 3 characters in the first row are the same, that means that somebody won. I'm going to use the ternary operator here. We have to determine who won, the player or the computer. Let's check to see if the first index, spaces at index 0, is equal to the player's marker. Ternary operator, like we're asking a question. If the player occupies the first row, then we'll print standard output you win. Otherwise, standard output you lose. Then I'm just going to add a new line here and here. Okay, there's one more thing we have to do with this condition, and I'll explain that. So let's run this. I'll pick spot number 9. You lose. The reason that we lost is that we're checking to see if the first row all has the same characters. They're technically all empty spaces, so our program thinks that somebody won because all of these characters match. There are 3 empty spaces. I'm going to amend this if statement. We'll want to ensure that none of the spaces are empty. And really, we only need to check the first space. I'll make this amendment. Spaces at index of 0 does not equal an empty space. And all these other conditions. If you'd like to keep this more organized, you can always surround some of these conditions with parentheses. I think it's more legible that way. Let's try that again, just to be sure that it's working. I'll pick something in the middle. Okay, yeah, so the computer doesn't win automatically if there's 3 empty spaces in the first row. Okay, so that is the first win condition. Let's copy this condition. I'll add else if. Now we'll check the second row. If spaces at index 3 is not equal to an empty space, and spaces at index 3 is equal to spaces at index 4, and spaces at index 4 is equal to spaces at index 5. Then does spaces at index 3 equal the player? Okay, so that is row 2. Let's copy and paste that else if statement. Then we'll need to check the last row. Spaces at index 6. 6 is 6 equal to 7, and is 7 equal to 8. So these conditions will check all of the rows. Then we'll need columns. Let's copy one of these else if statements, paste it. So we have 0, 0 is 0 equal to 3, and is 3 equal to 6. Okay, now time for the second column. Spaces at index 1 1 right here as well. Is 1 equal to 4? And is 4 equal to 7? Copy this again, paste it. Then we have the third column. 2, 2. Is 2 equal to 5? And is 5 equal to 8? Okay, now the diagonals. Spaces at 0, 0. Is 0 equal to 4? And is 4 equal to 8? Then the last diagonal. Spaces at index 2, 2. Is 2 equal to 4? And is 4 equal to 6? If there's no win conditions, we'll have an else statement. We will return false. Then all we have to do at the end of this function is to return true. Somebody won. Okay, so let's test this. I'll try and win with the first row. 1, 2, 3. You win. This time I'm going to try and lose. 1, 2, 4, 7. Whoops, 7's taken. 8. There we go, you lose. We can close out of the check winner function. We know that it's working. Then we just need to check to see if there's a tie, if there's no more spaces available. Within the main function, after our if statements, we'll add else if. We'll invoke the check tie function, pass in our spaces. Check tie returns a Boolean value. If it's true, we will set running to be false, then break. Then add that after the computer move section too, so right here. Then let's fill in this function. Within the check tie function, we'll iterate over the elements of our array spaces. We'll use a for loop. For int I equals 0. We'll continue this as long as I is less than 9 because there's a total size of 9 spaces. Increment I by 1. If spaces at index of I is equal to an empty space, that means we can continue. Return false. There's still empty spaces. If we iterate over our array and there's no empty spaces, well then we'll display standard output. It's a tie. I'll add a new line. Then we will return true. And we can get rid of that. Okay, so let's close out of this check tie function. Then after we exit our game, outside of this while loop, let's display a message. Standard output, thanks for playing. All right, and that's everything. Let's run this. I'm going to try and get a tie this time. 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. It's a tie. Thanks for playing. Alright everybody, that is a game of tic-tac-toe for beginners. If you would like a copy of this code, I'll post this in the comments section down below. And well, yeah, that's a game of tic-tac-toe using C++.